this is an intense level of anger to, and it's to not be able to control that and have it come out the way that it did.
It was a gruesome end to what some would describe as a toxic relationship. A Louisiana man is behind bars for murder after authorities say he slammed his SUV into his girlfriend and drove her into a clothing store, killing her moments after the two were in a heated argument. According to New Orleans police, the investigation unfolded on March 11th when officers responded to a call for a burglary. When police arrived, they spotted an SUV had crashed into a vacant clothing store. That's when authorities encountered 31-year-old Anthony Cooper, who was detained at the scene. When officers entered the building, that's when they made the gruesome discovery. Investigators found the body of 21-year-old Anastasia Rayborn, who was later identified through family as Cooper's on and off again girlfriend and the mother of his child. Initially, police believed the case was a traffic fatality before later determining the case to be a homicide.
It really does shock the conscience when you hear about that. And so it's rare that we would see these types of cases in the homicide realm. As a homicide detective, I'd never handled one personally, but I know of detectives who did. And typically, when they happened, they were usually involved in domestic relationships where there was an argument involved, and one party finally had enough with the other party and just snapped, broke, whatever, and then just runs them over.
Dr. Ken Lang is a retired homicide investigator. He explained in investigations like this, death investigators and traffic investigators would work together to comb through physical evidence, cell phone records, but also would reconstruct the crime scene in order to determine the rate of speed at the time of the crash.
Skid marks, impact marks in the roadway or on a curb side or in the impact. They can look at the at the fenders at the front of the vehicle, at the amount of damage, the type of substrate or the surface, the wall in this case of the building that the vehicle struck, and make scientific calculations to determine how much force was needed to generate that much damage. But then also, just as importantly, these reconstructionists are going to go into these newer model cars that we have computers on board. And so with a search warrant, you can quickly download the technical data of the car and you can determine, was the brake being applied? Was the gas being applied? Was the accelerator being applied at what rate? And again, all of that can help determine investigators to come to a point in determining whether this was an accident or an intentional criminal.
And here's what else we know about the fatal crash. According to local reports, neighbors describe witnessing a heated verbal argument between the two moments leading up to the crash. According to NOLA.com, Anastasia was in the vehicle's passenger side when she exited the car. She and Cooper were reportedly yelling at each other through the open passenger side window when she called Cooper an F and B word before walking toward the sidewalk. That's when Cooper reportedly sped up, veering sharply, crashing right into Anastasia and slamming her body through the wall. Witnesses reported hearing what they initially believed to be a truck hitting a pothole. One witness reported hearing the sounds of windows breaking and even called the cops initially believing it was a robbery.
But then as investigators begin to parse out the information through witnesses and statements and whatnot like that, they start learning that the pedestrian has connection with the driver in this case, and that not only do they have a connection, but that they were arguing before this so-called accident happens. So then that usually causes a red flag to go up in most investigators' mind, gives them pause, and they begin looking for more specific information. And so in today's day and age with technology, so we see that the accident involved a Ford Echo. I'm not sure which year that is, but the newer Ford Echos are equipped with this new Copilot 360 technology with Ford, and in it has a pre-collision assistance with automatic emergency braking. And if you go online to Ford's website, you'll see that a pedestrian walking out into traffic is precisely the scenario that this feature is supposed to activate and prevent such an accident from happening. So when you see and know that you have these kinds of features and details available in a vehicle, we begin to look in the vehicle to see if they've been turned off. And if they've been turned off, that could point towards intent on behalf of the driver.
The outlet also reported a former firefighter who was first on the scene attempted to render aid to her while she was still clutching her purse in one hand. but sadly, it was too late. Her body reportedly was bent at angles that potentially suggested her neck and back were broken, and the firefighter didn't find a pulse.
Given the amount of force that it needed to take down that wall and seeing what it needed to for this vehicle to jump the curb and hit Anastasia and then take down that wall, my gosh, it appears that the accelerator was probably punched. And that Ford Echo was moving with as much might as it could based on its capacity. And who knows if I think the only force that really stopped the momentum was that of the building. But what hate that has to be, what anger that has to be, it's unimaginable.
The firefighter also reported seeing a man with blood in his hands frantically going in and out of the vacant business, trying to help Anastasia. When police questioned him to ask if he was the driver, he said no, but was handcuffed anyway.
These types of cases, if this is a criminal event where Anthony intended to run down Anastasia and did this, we do see these. We don't see them often, but when we do, they're typically these toxic relationships where it's, one is like gas and the other is like a match, and the two together are just volatile. And it's rare to see these cases, but when we do, it's just heart-wrenching.
So what would cause a father to allegedly run down the mother of his young child? Here's what else we know about Anastasia and Cooper's relationship. Anastasia's older sister told local outlets the two were in an on-again, off-again relationship for years. The two had a 2-year-old son and were reportedly trying to mend their relationship. But Anastasia's sister said the two had a history of domestic issues. Even at one point, Anastasia was living at a women's shelter. The couple met when Cooper was 27 and Anastasia was 17. And her sister reported the two had been couch surfing prior to Anastasia's death, and Cooper got her the car used to allegedly hit her, but never let her drive it. Officials told Fox 8 Live back in January of 2023, deputies responded to a domestic-related verbal dispute between the two. At the time, Anastasia was attempting to move out of their shared home, but Cooper wanted her to stay. When deputies tried to arrest him, he physically resisted and Anastasia interfered with the arrest. Both were arrested, but prosecutors later agreed not to pursue charges in exchange for Cooper surrendering a gun that was found inside the home. Fast forward to the day of the tragic crash, it's unclear why Anastasia and Cooper were arguing. So could Anthony Cooper later argue that this was all an accident? Dr. Lang says it's possible.
Could it be a defense that they bring up that the technology failed, that it didn't respond appropriately, if at all? However, again, the accident reconstructionists, when they download the computer, that type of information is going to be in that data dump, and they're going to be able to go through and parse through that. And it wouldn't surprise me that if investigators reach out to Ford for some assistance and help with this in doing perhaps an even more in-depth analysis of the computer at the time and retrieving information that would not normally be retrieved through that initial data dump.
After the crash, Anastasia's sister posted this message on Facebook saying, quote, "This was my baby's sister. Her baby's father murdered her. If you are in an abusive situation, get out. She left so many times, but kept going back. I love you, Anastasia Ray. You're free now, and that baby is in good hands."
Unfortunately, many of these domestic situations are cyclical. And when I'm teaching my classes, I go through the different stages and how it starts off. Everything is you're in the honeymoon phase, and then you move into that violent event, and then after that there's the apology, and then you move back into the honeymoon phase. And typically, one of the partners involved in such a relationship thinks that the other is fixable, that the other will change. But unfortunately, as we know through what we know of psychology and the development of people, most often people don't change for the better. And I would just urge people that when you find yourself in these situations, seek professional help, look for an escape, and get out when you can. Even if you have to leave everything behind, just get out of that situation before it becomes toxic and lethal.
At this time, Anthony Cooper remains behind bars charged with second-degree murder. This week, a judge set his bond at $2 million. According to online records, if he's able to make bond, he will be ordered a 24-hour house arrest and subjected to GPS monitoring. Reporting for Law&Crime, I'm Elizabeth Millner.